Good evening, and welcome to the History and Genealogy Virtual Classroom. Today is Wednesday, April 7th, 2021, and it's 6:32 p.m. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mike Bridwell, and I will be moderating this Zoom session. Today's class, Researching 20th Century Veterans, will be taught by Ellen Mays. This class will be recorded and made available on the St. Louis County Library website and on the library's YouTube channel. The Q&A function has been disabled for this evening. Please ask questions by clicking on the chat icon and typing your question or comment. The instructor will answer questions at the end of this session. You will find a link to the handout in the chat. Closed captioning is available by clicking on the closed captioning icon on your Zoom screen. I will now turn this over to Ellen, and we will begin the class.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm really excited to be able to talk with you all about this topic tonight. It's one of my personal favorite topics to research myself, and so I hope that I can give you some inspiration for some various types of records and resources that you can use to learn about your ancestors who took part in various wars or conflicts throughout their lives. So we're going to mainly focus on 20th century records tonight, but we do have an 19th century class as well that will be coming up soon at some point in the near future. So first, to get started, we're going to use a basic research process, but with that, we also have to look at some basic pieces of information to get started before we can actually track down some of those records and resources. So the first thing we want to look at and try to determine is the time and place of service. So in order to do this, I really suggest creating a timeline to give you an idea of what times and dates and events you might be searching for during your record search. Also, if you know the rank of your ancestor at the both beginning and end of service, that can be helpful as well for your research. And if you know the branch that your ancestor served with, that can also be really helpful in getting started in your research. So where can you find this information if you don't have it already? You can find some of this information from family stories. So you can conduct some family history interviews, or you can look for personal family diaries or letters and see if they indicate the ancestor's rank. You can also look for this information in newspapers. We have a number of newspaper databases on our website to get you started with that. And if you can search those databases, you may determine some events, locations, and dates that will be really helpful for your research. And one other thing you can look for would be an heirloom or a medal or uniforms. Photographs can also be great as well to help determine some of this information to help you get started. So some basic research strategies that we're going to talk about tonight include creating a timeline. So if you aren't sure of a specific date, using approximate dates is fine. You more or less want to have a general idea, a chronological time frame of when events occurred and what time frames your ancestor would have been at different times, and also their ages at different times. Does that make a difference with what record sets you use? Also make a list of research questions and objectives that you have. If you put your main questions at the top and continue to add new questions throughout the research process, this can help you organize your research, but also help you remember to check other things as you encounter new questions throughout the research process, which will happen. You'll also want to compile a list of resources. So tonight's class will be really helpful for you in this research strategy, hopefully, including looking at databases, books, newspapers, personal papers, and diaries. We mentioned a few of those earlier. but creating a list of places to check for information can help you get started and make it feel less intimidating. One book I strongly recommend is U.S. Military Records by James Nagels. The call number is 929.3 N338U. And this is a great overview. And it starts from colonial America and it goes all the way up to the time that he published this book. And so you'll have a good overview if you want some more in-depth resources. However, you'll find a lot of great resources are now online to give you more updated information about what is now available digitally. So some key details from military records that you'll want to look for and that may be on certain records would be birth and death dates, names, addresses, health, and through the various types of records, you can get some of this basic information that can help you fill in your genealogy and your family tree, as well as give you a more complete history and understanding of the lives of your ancestors. So for various types of records, you can look for draft records, service records, pension records, and military histories. There are a lot of great individual histories of certain units or companies or squadrons, and that can also help you learn more about the story and more the details instead of just the dates and places and names, which is a great starting point, but everyone wants to know what really happened. So those stories and those history books can be really helpful for that purpose. So first we'll talk about draft records. This is a common record type that people often ask about when working on military records and military research. And one reason for this is the type of information that you can find on draft records, which can be helpful for a variety of reasons when you're doing family history research. Some of the information that you can find on draft records would include your full name, home address, date and place of birth, age, and country of citizenship. In addition to that, you can also find things like their occupation, their employer, a physical description, as well as relatives and their marriage status at the time that they registered. So where can you locate draft records? Well, depending on the time frame and the registration that you're looking for and the age of your ancestor, there are a couple different places where you can go to find these draft records. And I've divided up this presentation into different parts, including World War I versus World War II draft records to kind of give you a more specific approach to researching these records. But to just give you a starting point, 3 major databases that include a lot of these digital records include Ancestry, Fold3, and Family Search. All 3 of them are available through our website on our database page. You can access Ancestry.com right now remotely, our library edition, and Fold3 you can also access remotely. Family Search is a website that can be accessed from anywhere as well. So World War I draft cards. I'm going to go over a little bit of the background history and also give you some search tips and resources for locating these draft cards. So for World War I draft cards, some historical context about the draft. So 3 registrations took place between 1917 and 1918. The first one took place on June 5th, 1917, and included men ages 21 to 31. The second one occurred on June 5th, 1918, and it included men who turned 21, who had turned 21 since the first registration date. The third registration took place on September 12, 1918, and included men ages 18 to 45. And overall, they registered 24 million men, and the records can be found for most men born between September 1872 and September 1900. So if you can't remember all those details, the big main numbers that you want to look at would be if you had an ancestor who was born between September 1872 and September 1900. And a lot of that information is included on the syllabus for tonight. So if you don't have that, make sure to contact us and we'll make sure you have a copy of that. So World War I draft records are on Folge 3, which is a great resource for military records and that are available digitally. And when you search for these records, you're going to be able to find them through clicking on Browse at the top of the screen, and then that will take you to the filters from which you can select the publication that you want. So first you'll select World War I as the conflict or war to narrow down the records for you. And then in the publications menu that pops up, once you select that, it will give you a list of all the publications that are available for World War I on the Folge 3 database. And if you select the World War I draft registration cards, you can see on the right-hand side that that brings up all the various states. So you can select those and continue searching from there. But I sometimes find that's a great way to get straight to those records. You can do a basic search and search all the records with a name. But if you're wanting to do a more focused search for an individual born between September 1872 and September 1900, you could start with these World War I draft registration cards on Folge 3. Family Search also has World War I draft records. They have the United States World War I draft registration cards between 1917 and 1918. And it gives, in the description, an explanation of what these records include, and it will also give another overview of all the three different registrations that occurred between 1917 and 1918. And we'll give those dates as well as the age ranges for you. So you don't have to memorize all that information, but sometimes that can be really helpful if you're wondering why someone is or isn't showing up in a particular record set. You can also add other search items to help narrow it down or identify various individuals in the search. So you can add birthplace, birth year, first and last names, and other details as well. But that's a great resource as well on familysearch.org. If you search the catalog with the title, it should bring it up for you. And so this is another great resource that you can use from pretty much anywhere. So to get to the draft records on Ancestry, I've taken the time to put together what it would look like if you were to search Ancestry yourself. So from the main page, you go from search, and when you click on the search menu, it'll give you various record categories to select. So you can select military, and that will bring up the military records search menu. And under their featured data collections, the first record set that they show is for the World War I draft registration cards. And so if you want to search those records specifically, you can click on that link and it will take you to that record set for you to search. But it also gives some other useful data collections as well. As you can see, there's also World War II draft registration cards for 1942 included in this database. So if you want to narrow by category, you can do that as well if you're looking for other types of records. But I wanted to give you an idea of what the search looks like on Ancestry, just to give you an idea of what to expect on there. Once you click on the record set, it'll bring up a search menu for this record set specifically. You can search by first and last name. It helps if you can use an approximate year of birth if you don't have an exact date. Location of birth can help as well for identifying an individual. Oftentimes people will be trying to identify an individual. There may be multiple people with the same name in the same location. So if you have some other corroborating information that you have from other records that you can cross-check it with, that really helps identify those individuals in the records. You can also browse the collection on the right-hand side, but sometimes I just like doing a basic search to get started to see what is available without narrowing it down too much. This is an example of what it looks like when you search for Al Capone in the World War I draft registration cards database on Ancestry. And on the previous screen, where you enter the information, we just entered Alphonse Capone, and he lived in New York. And those are the 3 pieces of information that we entered into the search filters. And that brings up a list of results, which you will be able to go through depending on who you enter into the search box. But here we have 2 people at the top here. One has a birth date of 17 January 1899, and the other one has a birth date of November 14th, 1888. So that's one example of why it helps if you do have some of that starting information, such as a birth date, to help identify the individual in the records, in the results that turn up in your search. We also have a residence place, so if you know where he was living at the time, that can help as well. If you can combine that or find that information from other records like census records or city directories, that can be helpful as well. And they do have the actual pictures and records themselves. So when you click on view, it will take you to the actual records themselves, and then you can download them and print them or save them to your computer. This is what Al Capone's World War I draft registration card looks like. This is the front of the card, and this is the back. When you're searching, remember to print both. Sometimes people forget to check the reverse side of the card, which does have some really interesting information, including a physical description of the individual. So if you're wanting to know how tall your ancestor was, or what hair color they had, or eye color, you can get some of that information from the registration card as well. On the front of the card, you'll have their basic information, such as their name and address. You'll also have the date of birth listed there, as well as their age. So we know that Al Capone was 19 when he registered for the draft. His present occupation is listed as paper cutter, and he worked for the United Paper Box Company, and he lived in, or his employer was in Brooklyn, Kings County, New York. There was also an entry for his nearest relative. So when you're searching for draft records, this might help you show a family connection, or if you're looking for a relative's name, you might find that on these draft records as well. So that's another good thing to know about World War I draft records in particular. So for Al Capone, they list Mother Teresa Capone as his mother, as his nearest relative, and also her address. So in Brooklyn, Kings County, New York. So there's a lot of interesting information on here and a lot of helpful genealogical information as well. And you also have a signature of your ancestor here as well. So that's a nice little touch that is also included on these records for you. So where can you find copies of World War I draft registration cards? Well, you can find them online, like on the previous slide, and download them and print them from databases like Ancestry. But you can also find blank forms on the National Archives website. And these records, or these forms are blank, but it'll give you an idea of what questions were asked so that you can, again, assess whether that information or that record would include the information you're looking for. You can also order copies of the original records from the Southeast Regional Branch of the National Archives that is located in Morrow, Georgia, and they have the original World War I draft cards there. You can request the copies by mail, and if you go to their website, they have a lot of great information there for you. So this is what it looks like if you were to go to the website for the World War I draft registration cards. They have a direct link here if you want to order copies. But there's also great a lot of great information, including the background of the draft, as well as the Selective Service Act itself and what it entailed, and a description of the records as well. Very detailed information here. Another good thing to know about are these pamphlets that they create, these PDFs that you can download and print. And you can see this one is 167 pages long. So there's a lot of information here, a lot more than I can cover in tonight's class, but I want to let you know that it is available if you want to really research these records in depth and learn a lot about the records themselves. So some related records that can also help you find information about veterans in your family include the United States Veterans Administration Master Index between 1917 and 1940. It contains an index to veterans who served at any time during World War I and who made or whose heirs made pension or benefits claims of the VA between 1917 and 1940. These are on Family Search. So if you go to Family Search, this is what the collection looks like on there. You can search it for a name. And it'll bring up some records for you there. So you can click on a record set, an item results there for you. And it'll give you a brief transcription of the record, but you can also view the original document on Family Search as well. Once it loads. And there'll be basic information from the image index down at the bottom, but if you enlarge it, you'll be able to see it on the original record there as well. So this is an example of what those records would look like. The kinds of information included on the records, and where you could go to find these records. Another place you can look for ancestors who served in World War I is the Index to Naturalizations of World War I Soldiers on Fold 3. It includes index cards for locating naturalization records for the soldiers serving in the U.S. Armed Forces during World War I, specifically the year 1918. So this only covers 1 year, so it's not as broad of a record set as the previous one, but it's a good specific source for World War I soldiers that you can try. And it's on Fold 3. You can search for this item on their website, or if you go to the Browse section like I showed before, and go to the World War I section of publications, it will be included on that list of records to select. So pension payment cards. These are an interesting record set because they're not always known about, or not everyone knows that the index and images of the cards are available to search on Family Search. And what these were the images that showed the record of payment of pensions to veterans, widows, and other dependents. So if you go to the collection and you go to United States Veterans Administration pension payment cards, it covers the years 1907 to 1933. So it's a quite broad year range. So it can cover a lot of those registrations that we talked about earlier, and the various ages that people would have been throughout that time period. So you can, it's a lot broader than that, just 1 year 1918 collection set. It includes the index and the images of the cards, so you can search for that information as well. If you want to try out that record set later, it is on Family Search. And I also have these links on the handout for you, so you don't have to write down all of these URLs. So World War I muster rolls and rosters. So now we're getting into a slightly different type of record than draft records, but and index cards, but the muster rolls and rosters cover a much broader time period between 1916 and 1939. They're also on Family Search, but they're another record set that you can try if you're searching for World War I veterans. Another interesting resource that is on Family Search is the United States World War I American Expeditionary Forces list of deaths between 1917 and 1919. And the collection contains information about soldiers who lost their lives while serving with the American Expeditionary Forces during World War I. And these records are on Family Search. You can view it. You do have to set up a free account with Family Search to view the records, but once you do, you can view these records and download the records as well. So World War II draft cards. You'll see some similarities with these records compared to the World War I records, but there are a couple differences that you'll see, including the general look of the draft cards. So this is an example of a World War II draft registration card. They're fairly similar with the type of information included on the cards. Right at the top of the card, it gives information about the ages of the people that registered. And it says men born on or after February 17th, 1897, and on or before December 31st, 1921. So that's some information that you can use to calculate whether you might have had an ancestor who registered for the draft. Just because someone has a draft card, though, doesn't necessarily mean that they did serve. It just means that you can find that they registered, and you can find some other interesting information from their draft cards. So the World War II draft registration was the Selective Training and Service Act of 1940. The first registration date occurred on October 16th, 1940. And it required that all males ages 21 to 36 register. 6 more registrations occurred between 1941 and 1943. So there were a lot, as you can see, after this first initial one in 1940. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And there was an extra registration on between November 16th and December 31st, 1943. This expanded the draft to males ages 18 to 44 and included those living outside the US, which is an interesting detail as well. So a few more registration dates that might help you with your research include the first registration that occurred October 16th, 1940. Over 16 million men were registered between the ages of 21 and 36. So if you had someone who was between those ages on your family tree at this time, you have a very strong possibility that you can find a draft record for them. The second registration occurred on July 1st, 1941, and included men who had turned 21 since the first registration. The third registration occurred on February 16th, 1942, and included men ages 20 to 21 and 35 to 44. So those born on or after February 17th, 1897, and on or before December 31st, 1921. The fourth registration was also known as the Old Man's Draft Record and Old Man's Draft, and it occurred on April 27th, 1942, and included males ages 45 to 64. The fifth registration occurred on June 30th, 1942, and included men ages 18 to 20. And the sixth registration occurred between December 10th, 1942 and December 31st, 1942. This one included men who turned 18 after June 30th, 1942. So you can see a pattern with some of these. It covers the different years between the registrations for men who had turned 18 between those years of the registration. And then the extra registration that included those living outside of the US that had ages 18 to 44 between November 16th, 1943 and December 31st, 1943. So you can find these draft cards on fold 3. You can select World War II specifically on the main browse option, and that will give you the list of their most popular resources. And the World War II draft registration cards are included in this list. So it's a nice quick go-to for getting to these records. Service records. So these are a commonly requested and a topic of discussion for a lot of people researching military records. You can order records online from the National Archives Personal Records Center in St. Louis, Missouri. The various record types include compiled service records, pension applications, and they cover World War I to the present. To order these records online, I can show you how to do that. Share. My screen for you. Okay. So we'll go to nara.gov and Veteran Service Records on the main screen. It will give some important information for the current times and restrictions that they have for assisting people at the moment. But below those, they do have specific links that you can go to for requesting those records online. There's also more detailed information on what's available online, which I find as a helpful tool for getting an idea of what these records would include. Older records are available at their Washington, D.C. location, but you can order some of these records online as well. So if you click on what's available online, it'll take you to more information as well. So you can read through all this. It's divided up by era and conflict. So you can get an idea of what records they might have in addition to their service records that you can request. So if you go to Request Service Records online, it'll give this resource for answering frequently asked questions. So for example, who may request service records? That's a commonly asked question. And there's also information on privacy restrictions and public access. So that information is all included on the National Archives website. There's also information on what information you would need to have in order to request a record, where to send your request, and other methods for obtaining military service records. So if you click on access to the general public, if you don't think you have a close enough connection to the person you're requesting the service record of, you can take a look at the information on the Freedom of Information Act. So the information from these records include non-archival records, and without veteran or next of kin's authorization, there's also additional information for you as well on how to navigate that situation. There's additional information on how to request those records. There's a standard form 180 that is specific for requesting those records. But there's also a section on here called eVetRecs, where you can start an online request, and this will take you through the process of ordering a record online. You can find out more details about the Privacy Act of 1974 and what that means for requesting records and how that applies to you and the individual you're searching for. And you can also check the status of requests if you've previously requested one, and make new requests as well. So that's a common question I get from people, is how do you request the record from the National Archives? So I usually go to their website and show them how to get to this section. It gives you a lot of information without having to call them, and you don't necessarily have to wait for someone to get back to you to get some of these details that you may need prior to requesting. So you may have to get some of these different pieces of information together before you can request a record, but this will let you know how to do that. Down below here, it looks like they have some examples of questions people have posted on how to research an ancestor. And so you might get some inspiration on their History Hub for locating military service records. There's also a video on here on what happens when you submit a request, so you can view their process if you have more questions on what happens after you submit a request to them. And you can find out all those details through them by going to their website. So it's a great avenue for researching those records. So included in your handout is a bibliography of some recommended books in our collection. It's not completely comprehensive. There are a lot more books that I could not fit onto that bibliography. But in order to get to those resources, I definitely suggest searching our library catalogs. Our St. Louis County Library Catalog has expanded with the addition of Mobius, which lets you search libraries, library collections at all the major universities in the area, and request books through interlibrary loan from those libraries as well. WorldCat.org is another great place to try and locate a particular book or resource. On your bibliography, you'll be able to see that the books are split up and organized by subject and topic to help guide your research and help you when you're compiling your list of resources to start with. There are some specific Missouri military records as well. For Missouri, they include the Missouri Reports of Separation Notices. These are on Family Search and cover the years 1941 to 1946. To get more information, they have a description to explain more of what this collection is about. You can click Learn More to get more detailed information, but They basically are images or indexes of World War II reports of separation between 1941 and 1946. The original records are located at the Missouri State Archives in Jeff City, and they are available on Family Search, so you can access that freely without having to have a paid subscription or anything like that. Other Missouri military records to take a look at include the Missouri World War I service cards at the Missouri State Archives and the Missouri pre-World War II Adjutant General Enlistment Contacts, 1900 and 1941 on Family Search. These links are also included on your handout. So St. Louis area military records. So we're now getting into more specific record sets for the St. Louis area. So we're taking a finer look into what is available more specifically. So the St. Louis Post-Dispatch list of World War I and World War II casualties is a link that I've included on your handout. This links to actually a web archive, an archived website, but it does take you to the actual index that was created by the St. Louis Public Library. And this is what it looks like when you go to that website. And if you scroll down to the bottom, there'll be lists from alphabetical listings, including World War I and World War II. There are specific listings for the casualty lists, including missing in action, and prisoner of war record listings, reburial lists. And so there's a lot of information there as well. And then the next one we actually have on the St. Louis County Library website, and that is the St. Louis Star-Times article series of St. Louis World War fighters, and it is an index to the series. And if you find an ancestor in this index on our website, you can request a copy of the article through our interlibrary loan service. We have a lookup request form that is now online, so if you have that information, you can input it directly into our lookup request form and send it directly to us. So I went over a little bit of this earlier, but just to recap, the military records at the National Archives for World War I to the present are at the Personnel Records Center here in St. Louis, Missouri. For Revolutionary War to 1918 records, those are housed at the National Archives building in Washington, D.C. Some recommended reading for you for learning about military service records at the National Archives is this book by Trevor K. Plant, call number 973.016 P713M, and it's available at our library. It is available for checkout, so it's a great resource if you haven't read it before, and a good overview of military service records. So at the Washington, D.C. Location, there are records for volunteers that cover 1775 to 1902. There are also records for the regular Army that include enlisted personnel 1789 to October 31st, 1912, and officers 1789 to June 30th, 1917. For the Navy, they have records for enlisted personnel between 1798 and 1885, and officers 1798 to 1902. For Marine Corps records, they have records for enlisted personnel 1798 to 1904, and some officers for 1798 to 1895. So that's a fairly small time frame, but there are other places where you can go to get some of those records. The Coast Guard records are available at the DC location for between the years 1791 and 1919. These records also include their predecessor agencies such as the Revenue Cutter Service, the Life Saving Service, and the Lighthouse Service. Military records holdings in the St. Louis location include records that for the U.S. Army, discharged or retired after September 30th, 2002, and include officers after June 29th, 1917, and enlisted after October 31st, 1912. For the Air Force, they have records for officers after 1901, enlisted personnel after 1884, and records after September 30th, 2004 are with the Air Force in electronic format and are not transferred to the National Personnel Records Center. So if you're looking for more recent records that are post-2004, you do have to go to the Air Force for those records. For the Navy, they have officers' records for those separated after 1904, enlisted after 1905, and records after December 31st, 1994 are retained by the Navy. For the Marine Corps, they have records between 1905 to April 30th, 1994, as well as May 1st, 1994 to December 31st, 1998. So there's a bit of a separation there. But after December 31st, 1999, the records are housed at the headquarters of the U.S. Marine Corps. So that might also give you some ideas of what timeframes you're looking at and where you might need to go for those records. And finally, for the U.S. Coast Guard, the Personnel Records Center has records for officers separated after 1897 and enlisted personnel after 1905. For the predecessor agencies, they have records for those who separated after 1919. And now we'll get into some other topics, such as the Korean War records. One great way to start your research for these records is to go to the Family Search Research Wiki page. The research page has sections for each of the major conflicts throughout history. And if you go to their website and their research wiki page, this is what it looks like for US military records online. They have direct links to those records that are available. They also tell you which ones may be paid ones you have to pay for, or ones that you can access for free through Family Search. Some are through Ancestry, so you can still access those through our library database, but this will let you know if they are available through a database online. So if you go scroll down to the bottom of the screen here, you can get to the section on World War I, World War II, and the Korean War between 1950 and 1953. There are direct links to some of these record sets that are available online, including the United States American Prisoners of War during the Korean War, 1950 to 1953. That is an index only. A lot of these are index only, but if you're looking for an individual's name to just confirm service or time frame or time period, you can use indexes to help you with that. There's also a link to the American Battle Monuments Commission Korean War Honor Roll on this Family Search page. And so there's a lot of quick go-to links on this page here. So this is one of the first places I like starting any kind of research with for genealogy and family history, not just for geographic information, but also for specific record sets as well. So some of these collections I mentioned before when we were on the website, but these are records not everyone knows that are available through Family Search online. And I also have a link to the Monuments Commission as well. These are all included on your handout, so don't get overwhelmed by this screen in front of you. But I just wanted to show you that there are several records available online. So for Vietnam War records, I suggest starting with a similar approach using the Family Search page I just showed you before. Some of their featured collections include a list of casualties of the Vietnam War between 1956 and 1998, as well as military personnel who died during the Vietnam War, 1956 to 2003. So that's a fairly wide year range, but that can help you identify a person who died during the Vietnam War. There's also a link to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial on your handout, but also on the Family Search Wiki page as well. To get to some of these records on Fold 3, you can browse in a similar way we did with the World War I records. But when you click on Browse on Fold 3, you'll then want to filter publications by conflict or war, and then click See All. That's an important part for this portion, or you won't see this option show up for you on the screen. And then it will let you select a Vietnam War. So when you first start your browse, you may not see the Vietnam War records show up, but you should be able to click See All, and that will bring up all the other records, including both Korean and Vietnam War records on Fold 3. So locating World War II veterans on Ancestry, you can look for people born between 1897 and 1926. You can search by the given name. Also verify any information with other records to verify the accuracy. And then I also have listings of the various military museums, archives, and special collections for the various branches. This will definitely expand on just the record collections and sets themselves. If you want a larger picture of what happened at different times for the various services, you can go to their history offices and museums and heritage centers, and there's a lot of great information there for you. I can show you examples of what they have, but there are a lot of digital collections now that they have that you can browse through. Images, photographs, cruise books are on the Naval History and Heritage Command website, which are really cool to be able to see those photos and cruise books that were created by the people serving at that time. And there are similar things for the other branches as well. But I wanted to include these to also remind you to kind of expand your options and not narrow it down to only one type of repository. Libraries are great. We have a lot of great online resources and books, but going to the source and going to some of these museums and research centers are great resources for you as well. They also have specialists and historians who specialize in these areas, so they would be a wealth of information for you as you continue your search. International military records can also be found on the three main databases that I mentioned tonight, Fold 3, Ancestry, and a third one, in addition to Fold 3, is Find My Past. We have some classes on Find My Past, I think, coming up, but this is another great resource for military records as well. I know there's a lot of information I covered tonight, so I want to give you a chance to ask some questions if you have them. And if you'd like me to show you more of a specific website or record collection or browse it with you, I'd be happy to spend a little bit more time going over some specific things depending on what your interests are. So thank you for listening to me talk, and I'll hand it over back to Mike.
Thank you, Ellen. That was excellent. So we have a chance, and I think I may have been confused. I'm not sure if it's the Q&A function that's been disconnected or the chat function, but I've been able to send comments on the chat function, and I hope that you, our participants, are able to as well. The link, again, the link to the handout for tonight's class was in the chat, and but I think that's it, unless someone has any other questions. Well, if not, then I guess we can close. And you can always contact us, and in my script in just a minute, I'll tell you how. So I think we will finish up for the night. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the class and found the information to be useful. If you have further questions or comments, please feel free to contact History and Genealogy at 314-994-3300 or by email at genealogy@slcl.org. If you're watching this live, I remind you that this class has been recorded and will be made available for the library's website at www.slcl.org/genealogy and the library's YouTube channel. If you are watching this on YouTube, we invite you to like this video and post a comment below. This ends the webinar. Have a good evening.